Hi, I'm Krista Brady, and I'm a microbiology faculty here at Pima Community College.
And I'm Sid Jackson. I'm a microbiology specialist here at PCC.
In this video, we'll be giving you some tips on how to clean the microscope in a classroom laboratory setting, as well as how to encourage your students to care for their microscopes during the class. First, we'll describe what is expected of each person who handles the microscope. Students are expected to clean their microscope after each use and to alert the faculty if there are any problems with their microscope. Faculty are expected to teach students how to clean their microscopes and to promote student cleaning, as well as to remedy any issues brought to their attention by the students and alert lab staff if there are issues they can't remedy during the class period.
Lab staff are expected to perform deep cleaning and maintenance duties on the microscopes at least once a semester, as well as address any issues that are brought up with the microscopes by the faculty. The microbiology lab specialists will be expected to alert faculty members if they notice a chronic problem with a certain microscope. So the faculty member can determine if there is a training issue with the students. First, we'll go over how to clean the microscope. What I have in front of me is the instructor cleaning set. It includes some optical lens cleaner, some swabs, lens paper, and alcohol wipes. If you're not already, put on some gloves to make sure that the oils from your hands do not get left on the lenses after you clean them. To clean the eyepieces, we'll first take a piece of lens paper and fold it in half. And then you'll want to wrap it around your index finger and hold it in place like so. Cleaning the eyepiece might be made easier if you remove the rubber ring around the eyepiece if the microscope has it. So we'll be doing that here. To clean the eyepiece, you'll take the lens paper on your finger, gently touch it to the surface of the glass, and rotate in small circles. Continue doing this until the eyepiece glass is clear. If you're having trouble removing any residue from the eyepiece with just the lens paper, you can take some of the optical lens cleaner, just a drop, onto the lens paper and use that to clean the eyepiece. You'll want to dry it afterwards with a clean piece of lens paper. When you're finished, you can put the rubber ring back on by just gently pressing it to the rim. It should clip into place. Next, we'll move on to cleaning the objectives. For the lower objectives, mainly the 4x and 10x, the lens is actually further up in the chamber than what can easily be reached by your finger. So we'll be wrapping a Q-tip with some lens paper by folding it in half, placing the tip of the cotton swab onto the lens paper and wrapping it around. It doesn't need to be super neat, you just need to make sure to cover that whole tip in lens paper. So now we'll clean a lower objective. While holding the lens paper in place, you can stick the tip up inside the objective to clean the lens. You only need enough force to touch the lens paper to the lens to clean it. As we move up into higher objectives, the 40x and the 100x, you can continue to use the swab, or you can just use some lens paper wrapped on your finger like we did with the eyepieces. As we're cleaning the objectives, we want to make sure that after we clean each objective, we check for clarity to make sure that it's actually clean. If you're having issues getting an objective clean with just the lens paper, you can take your swab with the lens paper on it and dab a drop of optical lens cleaner on the tip and use that to clean the objective instead. Otherwise, you can add a drop onto the lens paper on your finger. As a note, whenever you use the lens cleaner, make sure to leave a couple seconds before checking for clarity to make sure any residual lens cleaner evaporates, because otherwise it can still appear blurry when it's actually clean. Also, if you can't remove an obstruction using the lens cleaner, set the microscope aside for staff attention. Next, we'll be moving on to troubleshooting some problems in class. Now, you might come across problems that you can't handle due to the time constraints that you face in a classroom, but here are some things that you might be able to address instead of bringing a microscope to a staff member. If the student is having problems with the microscope not turning on, one thing that you might want to check is to make sure it's plugged in. This one is obviously not. And make sure that the outlet that it's in is actually powered. Another problem that we have seen is that on the other side, there is a port on the microscope that might not be fully plugged in. This might plug directly into the microscope with some models, or there's an extra transformer box that's attached. Another thing is that the student might have the rheostat turned all the way down, so in that point, you'll want to try turning the light up. If the student is having trouble seeing the full image underneath the microscope, they might not have the objective seated correctly. In that case, just twist the nose piece until you feel it click into place. If the student is having issues focusing or only coming up with a blurry image, there's a couple things we can try to fix this. The first thing you can check is to make sure that the diaphragm is set to the proper light level for the objective that they're using. That'll make sure that they have enough light going through to be able to see anything through that objective. The next thing you can check is to make sure that the diopters, which you can find on the eyepiece itself, are even or pushed all the way in. If they're adjusted not to a person's specific eye prescription, it can cause the image underneath the microscope to look partially blurry or like at an angle with partial in focus, partially out of focus. You can do this by just twisting the eyepiece. Another thing you could try is to make sure that the student's slide is right side up. You can do this by doing a scratch test onto the wax that they use to designate the area that they're preparing their smear. If it doesn't leave back a divot, you know that their slide is upside down, and it needs to be turned right side up. The last thing you will want to try is to actually clean the objective quickly to see if the objective itself was dirty rather than any of the other options. If you find that you're able to focus under the microscope when the student can't, you might want to try suggesting to them to try focusing onto the wax pencil itself or using a Sharpie to make a small dot that they can use to focus rather than trying to focus on the smear directly. Next, we'll go over some problems that you might find in the classroom setting that should be best left to the lab staff to address due to either the amount of time it takes to fix said problem or the extra tools necessary to fix it. The first one is a sticky stage, where you're having issues moving the stage itself in the XY plane. This is due to lack of lubrication in the gears itself and needs to be addressed outside the classroom. The next one is that the stage will not rise high enough to focus under the 100x objective. This is due to the rack stop knob being twisted too tightly and should be done outside of a class to make sure that the 100x objective is not damaged in the fixing process. The last problem you'll commonly face is the stage itself dropping after focusing. This is due to the tension inside the focusing knob being too loose and needs a screwdriver to fix on most of our models here, so it should be done outside the classroom. If you do find an issue with a microscope that you can't handle in the classroom, find a repair tag in the classroom itself, fill it out, and affix it to the microscope. If you can't find a repair tag, please alert lab staff and they can provide you one or show you where they're located. When filling out the repair tag, make sure to fill out as much detail as possible, including your name, the date, the microscope in question, including its number, and as much detail about the problems that you faced with the microscope. Affix it to the microscope itself, and, if possible, alert a staff member that there's a microscope in need of repair.
How do we promote students cleaning their microscopes? One suggestion is to have the instructor check each student's microscope after a microscope lab to ensure that it is clean of immersion oil and properly put away. This is time-consuming, but it allows for individual attention to students to ensure proper training on how to care for their microscope. After the first few microscope labs, the instructor can stop doing these checks to allow students to become more independent in caring for their own microscopes. After weeks during which there is heavy microscope use, it's a good idea to set aside a little bit of class time for the whole group to pull out the microscopes and do a little more thorough cleaning. This is also a great opportunity to provide a few extra credit points as an incentive to students for participating. I'm going to throw out a couple of additional ideas so that you can choose which you might like or come up with your own ideas. One idea would be to, instead of checking the microscopes during class, to check them after class and then deduct points from students who have not cleaned their microscopes well, or give extra credit points to students who did do a good job of cleaning their microscope. An alternative would be to pull aside one student from each lab group to give a little more individualized attention during a class period and encourage them to take that knowledge back to their lab group during subsequent class periods and rotate through the students each class period so that eventually each student gets that more individualized attention.
And that's how we take care of our microscopes here at Pima Community College. Thank you for watching.